Hey everybody, welcome to another edition, a little bit overdue, but another edition of Liam's Hockey here, brought to you, as per usual, by Hosie and Brown Automotive, my dear friend Rod Brown, and thank him very much. And we will, at this time, formally say goodbye to Ad Seal Services. Mark Cullen, another longtime friend and classmate from that fantastic class of 78 at St. Pius X High School here in Ottawa, has retired. And Mark is moving on, baby. And well-deserved, well-earned. And he went out with a bang and taken up that bunch of sponsorship there of the last bunch of shows. And so one last time, I will thank the number one waterproofing business probably in all of Eastern Canada, Ad Seal Services. And yes, they're a commercial operation, but they do great stuff. And Mark is a longtime friend and classmate, has his rod with Hosie and Brown, and I thank him very much. So thank you, Mark, and thank you, Ad Seal, for being part of Liam's Hockey for as often and as long as he did. Hosie and Brown continue, as does Shoeless Joe's Orleans, baby. Yes, sir. You know, it's unbelievable. I was talking to Jeff today, Jeff Underhill, one of the partners of Shoeless Joe's, both locations, but primarily now referencing the new one here in Orleans. Well, new, coming up on 2 months, 7 weeks or so since we had the opening, that formal night with Claude Julien, Jason York, Ron Tugnut, among others. Danny Sagan was there, former Ottawa 67 great, among others. And Jeff told me today he has not taken a day off. I mean, it's just crazy. He says they've had a couple lineups in the middle of the week, late, and people are flooding in there, checking it out, the great food and ambiance. And, of course, he's taken it right through these first 2 rounds of the playoff, the first 4 rounds of the playoffs as we're into the Stanley Cup final now. More on that in a moment. And they're going to stay on board here for the next little while as we continue here with Liam's Hockey. So, Shoeless Joe's 4444 Innis Road, 4444. It's in Orleans, right by the 10th line. Can't miss it. It's on the south side. Ample parking, fantastic ambiance, lots of screens, great food. So slide in if you get a chance and go and see the gang and enjoy a cold beverage and some wings or whatever the great stuff on the menu may be for that night, and take in a game or take in whatever else may be on, or just go and enjoy everybody that hangs there. It's a great spot. So thanks, Jeff, for coming back on board and are hanging with us here at Liam's Hockey. So only other bit of housekeeping I want to mention is the shirt I'm wearing right now. No Limits arm wrestling. I'm not an arm wrestler. I used to. One of my dearest friends, Gordy Paul, was a pretty good pull back in the day, as they say, many years ago in the lightweight class. He was dominant in the region of Ottawa, Carleton, and beyond. But this is the nickname of a Canadian, a guy who actually lives in our area. Now, I know it's a bit of an underground sport, even though it has really mushroomed and blown up in the last few years, even much more so than it was. I mean, we used to occasionally see it on ABC's Wide World of Sports, and they'd show the national championships, typically in the States. It's all over now. It's a global sport. Anyway, long story short, Devon Larratt, nicknamed No Limits, from right here in our community of Ottawa, Carleton, ironically, Canadian, retired Canadian military, JTF, the best of the best, did multiple tours overseas, is involved in the biggest match in the history of the sport this Saturday in Dubai. So he's pulling a 400-pound Russian named Levon. I'm not even going to try and say his last name. Saganishvili, something along those lines. Anyway, this guy is literally just a monster, just a machine. His arm's a piston. And Devon's going to probably come in around 300 pounds or close to it. And Levon is 400 plus. It's going to be 700 plus pounds of pressure. on the table. They're doing a 6 matches, first to win 4 wins. Believe me, there'll be lots of money on this one for them professionally, as there should be. And there is even a wager on this if you're so inclined. So I'm wearing the shirt to represent Devon Larratt, a guy from our area and a Canadian who's in the biggest match in the history of the sport. And wishing them all the best. That's on this Saturday. It's actually getting... Watch it online. If you want to throw a couple bucks at it, it's not expensive. And you can watch it online if you choose to do so. You go on YouTube, just Google it. All the info will come up. That's it for housekeeping. I just want to get in very quickly here to the Montreal Canadiens. I'm going to touch on them first. Hot topics, of course, being the Shea Weber trade. And for Dadonov, fantastic deal. I just like it for both sides, really, but really thrilled for what Montreal did with it. And of course, the trade talk from the Minions about Josh Anderson. So we'll touch on Weber first. Moving the contract, lowering Montreal's cap hit. Now, they had Weber on long-term injury reserve, as will Vegas, for obvious reasons. He's never going to play again in the NHL. But removing him off their long-term injury reserve, which is a complicated thing. There is somewhat sort of a layman look to it, where if you have somebody there, you are able to exceed the cap by the amount of that contract, minus what you were under the cap to begin with. That's accrued cap space. There's all sorts of different criteria. Fact remains is that it was a good move by Montreal to remove the contract, and by bringing in Dadonov on who's on an expiring contract. He's a guy coming off a 20-goal, 43, 44-point season, I believe, in Vegas. He's a quality, regular NHL player, which Montreal will need to have in the lineup over the course of this upcoming season. You can't just go with a bunch of rookies and a bunch of guys with less than 100 games experience who don't know how to handle at least some level of NHL play, despite the fact that Montreal are heavily pointing towards another bottom 5 finish, which is fine. I think everything is going according to plan. The bloom, for me, is still on the rose from that incredible run in 2021. Now, the way things have played out with the absolute devastation from the injuries, not only Carey Price dealing with that, but then his mental health, Jonathan Drouin's mental health, the situation involving, obviously, the new general manager and Kent Hughes, Jeff Gorton coming in, Marty St. Louis replacing Dominic Ducharme. There's been such change in the organization, and clearly, 1,000%, maybe for the first time, even more so than what Bob Gainey said he was going to do when he came from Dallas and took over as general manager of the Habs. And it did take a few years, and they actually ascended to being one of the better teams in the NHL in 07, 08, 09, in that area, largely coming under Carey Price. He was still a couple years away from really becoming what we saw, especially in 2015, put in one of the greatest goaltending displays in regular season history. But Bob Gainey really tried to retool and rebuild the Habs. This is even much more so than that. And I, for one, as a Hab fan, I'm fully on board with what's going on. You bring in Dadonov. First of all, anything you read online, you have to differentiate between the trolls and the haters and the people who are commenting, whether it be in this fashion or writing something down. Get your 2 or 3 people that you want to follow that you think can give you credible stuff that don't have an agenda. They don't hate, they're not trolling, and they're actually making legit hockey comments. This was a successful trade for both teams. Dadonov is expiring regardless of what they get for him, if anything, at the trade deadline, if they want to move him then, providing he has stayed healthy and performed to some level over the course of this upcoming season. Right now, he's a credible body on an expiring contract they can bring in and either move them or he's gone. At the end of the year, that $5 million comes right back and they'll need it. They got to re-up Caulfield. They got to do some things. They'll have the money. They'll be able to do it. And with Weber's contract done and gone from the Montreal Canadiens, he becomes a long-term headache for somebody else. In this case, Vegas. Whether he's shuffled off again or not, who knows? That's, that was only if he filed his papers, and then Nashville on the hook for cap recapture anyway. Montreal was not on the hook for anything. And now he's off the books altogether. And his tenure in Montreal will go down as exemplary. As a guy who not only came in, performed to the best of his ability, showed incredible character and leadership, not only that, took the C, wore it in true Montreal Canadian flavor, and played just lights out, as the rest of the roster and team did during that playoff run in 2021. Everyone knows the big three on Montreal. There'll never be a defense threesome or core like them of the late 70s Montreal Canadiens with Larry Robinson, Serge Savard, Guy Lapointe. You bring in the other guys who supplemented that incredible threesome, guys like Rod Langway and Bill Nyrup and players of that ilk, let alone guys that were just 6th and 7th D guys, Pierre Bouchard till the Jonathan fight, and Joe Lupien, the other guys who just plugged in, even a utility guy like Jimmy Roberts. You had other guys, you had Don Orey. But the big three were the big three. In 2021, the Habs had the big four. And with the rules being what they are, and will always somewhat be come playoff time, despite different changes and crackdowns, there's always going to be room for defensemen who are overtly physical, cross the line, knowing only a percentage of times they'll get called, whether it be for cross-checking, attempted mayhem in front of the net. And that quartet of Hab D in 2021, led by Weber and Petrie's last hurrah, really, was just fantastic. Joel Edmondson and Ben Sherratt, just incredible how well the four of them played. And then you had Carey Price until they ran into the brick wall, which was Tampa at that time, and certainly the last 2 years. We'll see. Touch on that in a second with Game 3 coming up. Pivotal game tonight against Colorado. So great deal for Montreal. Fantastic trade for the Canadiens. Bring in a guy, play out the year, credible, regular forward. So you get a player on contract, you move Weber's, and you're starting to slowly turn. You see what's going on with the Canadiens, and they have got such an abundance of phenomenal defense coming. And it's going to be so exciting here going forward for the Habs, regardless of who they take first overall here. Shafalowski, probably not saying that right, or Shane Wright. And I don't know, I haven't seen enough of both to make a credible opinion. And I watched Shane Wright play live this year. The guy missed a whole season of junior. He would probably be my pick. But if they go the other kid, then so be it. I really do trust Jeff Gorton and Kent Hughes right now to make what I think is the right call in a draft that really is kind of a pick 'em. So right now, I like where the Habs are and where they're going and where they're forecasted to be. So that's the Weber Dadonov trade. Josh Anderson, the trade talk, and he was trending for about 3 days on Twitter. Just moronic and idiotic, some of the comments. You got a guy 6'3", 227. First of all, he was drafted 95th overall in 2012. This guy was never projected out to be a 50-goal scorer, or the next coming of Cam Neely, Brendan Shanahan, Gary Roberts, or Keith Tkachuk. The only four players in NHL history to score 50 goals and 200-plus penalty minutes in the same season. It was never forecasted to be that. So, what you got in Josh Anderson is a bit of an enigma. When he wants to dominate a game, and we've all seen it. We saw it in Columbus when he really teased the Blue Jackets there that one year, where it looked like he was going to score 30. But here he is. He averages a little less than a half point a game in his NHL career so far. He was drafted 95th overall. He never averaged a point a game even in junior in London. But he teases you, right? So for me, what they'll do, what Kent Hughes and company are going to do, is they're going to keep this guy, unless somebody makes a ridiculous offer, and then everybody's movable. Like Kent Hughes said, hey, we finished 32nd. I'm going to listen to everybody. There's no problem there. So we'll see what transpires. But you don't move him unless you get a ridiculous offer that you can't refuse. And what you do with Josh Anderson is you get Marty St. Louis and the coaching staff, whomever it may be. I'm not sure if everybody's coming back from Montreal or not. That remains to be seen. Regardless, though, in Marty, a guy who they now have extended to be their official full-time head coach. And again, fantastic acquisition. I think I said this on the last time I did do a Liam's Hockey. Can you imagine? You got trolls out there saying that what a disastrous signing because he's going to crash and burn and it's going to be terrible. The team's going to finish brutal. He can't do anything. He's got no experience or anything else. No, this is exactly why it's a great signing. There's no expectations on this team next year from anybody who really knows hockey. They don't have the defense and they don't have the goaltending, and I'll touch on that in a second. So you sign a guy, you let Marty just see if he can grow with the team. It's as simple as that. If he crashes and burns by his own choosing, he can't handle the stress, he can't handle the losing, or his inability now in a full season as a head coach and he's just not able to do the gig, maybe he'll quit. Maybe his health will suffer, maybe stress, whatever, and he'll pack it in. Won't be the first guy. Boom Boom Jeffrey left as a head coach for health reasons. Pat Burns had enough and he left. You know, this has happened before in hockey history. Guys just sometimes just say, see ya, I'm out of here. Look at Dave Lowry, or Paul Maurice in Winnipeg this year. Like, it happens. He's one of the winningest coaches in NHL history in the regular season. But sometimes guys just have enough. So we'll see. I think it's a fantastic addition. If for no other reason, what he has meant to Cole Caulfield, he's a great addition to the Montreal Canadiens as a head coach. You let him come in, get his feet wet, 3-year deal, perfect. None of that goes against the cap. No expectations on the team. His only job is to continue to grow Suzuki and Caulfield, to plug in the pieces as they're obtained, whether it be the young guys still on the roster as they grow another year, or anybody else new who might make the team out of camp or they bring in, and then get the rest of the guys who are in the lineup to compete. Look, this is nothing new. In a perfect world, whether you be the Habs or any other team that are going to languish near the bottom of the league next year, ideally, you want to lose because you don't have enough talent to compete. You don't want to lose because you got outworked and because you didn't care, because you give a crap meters at 0, which was most of the last 10 or 12 games Montreal played this year. So that's the challenge of Marty St. Louis and the coaching staff. And with Josh Anderson, you want to sit this guy down. You want to go over the video of games that he dominates. Look, he's not a stupid man. And you want to say, look, Josh, we want to find what have we got to do? What have you got to do in conjunction with us as coaches to bring this out of you more consistently? How do we get you from 0.4 points per game to 0.75? Imagine the jump that would be. Imagine the extra points, extra goals, and that translates into another probably 6, 7, maybe 8 points in the standings. Not going to mean anything next year, but he's 27, 28. I mean, this guy's in his absolute prime. 6'3", 227 when he wants to take a game over and he can fight. If I was coaching him, man, I would have a blast. I would have a blast coaching that guy. I know over 82 games the way it is today, it's not like the old days, the scare tactics and the fear mongering and the threats that you could do to these men back in the days is what led to guys like Frank Mahovlich having nervous breakdowns. But it also led to other guys that played in the league and were very average players, but come playoff time became absolute beasts because they were so motivated by fear of losing their gig back in those days that you could do that. But what it did show was the potential in these guys to bring it. In those days, it was just 2 rounds of the playoffs. Now it's 4 when you make it. Now it's an 82 regular season, 82 games. Back then it was 70. I'm talking about post-1950. The NHL went to a 70-game schedule in 1950. It's a long time ago that they've been playing at least 70 games in the NHL. That's a long time, with the exception of lockouts and COVID seasons and things like that. It's been at least 70 games. And it's been over 80 since 74, 75. It's been at least 80. And there were a couple of years when it was 84, when they had neutral site games. I digress. You take Josh Anderson. You light a fire under that guy. You see, get him to look at video. Sit him down. Figure it out. And say, what do we got to do to get this out of you more consistently? And if I was coaching, I would say, you know what, Josh? When you're asleep for 40 minutes, I'm going to come in sometimes in the second period. I'm going to come right in front of your stall. I'm going to say, big man, you've done nothing tonight. Nothing. You go out in these last 20 minutes and the old, again, hate to use his name all the time because he wasn't really a nice guy, but he was a winner. I know back in the day, different story, but Punch Imlach used to say, get on the score sheet somehow. Josh, go out and get on the score sheet, buddy. Do something, kid. You're making 5.5. Got 4 years to go. You're in your prime. You're a beast, 6'3", 227. I mean, oh my God. Go out and get it on. I don't care how. Do something. Get involved. Now, you can't do that over 82 games. But I would go to him at the start of the year and say, look, here's your numbers, bud. I mean, you're almost a decade in the league here. And you're so effective. Just got a silver medal for Canada, where, again, when he showed up in games on the big ice, incredibly effective. We rarely have got a chance to see that, right, with him. He's never going to get picked for any of the best-on-best competition. But that's what I would do. And you know, you could do that with a lot of guys in the league. I'm just using him as an example right now because he was trending on Twitter. Of course, he gets the Montreal thing and trolls, haters, people who have a cognizant thought about it. He's not going anywhere. These guys don't grow on trees. And you'll let him try and develop with the team over this season or next. The first season that Montreal will want to see some sort of beginning of turning things around will not be next season. It'll be the one after. And maybe even the one after that, perhaps. Because the rest of a lot what's going to happen here, short-term and long-term in Montreal, is going to be determined by Carey Price and his status. I'll finish on this note. This is really pretty much, well, I'll finish on Montreal on this note and then a quick comment on Colorado, Tampa. Carey's going to announce at some point here in the next several weeks, couple months or so, what his status is for this season. He'll play or he won't. Goes on long-term injury reserve, which does somewhat hamper the Habs because if he is healthy or eligible to play at all this season, you have to have that money available, be able to pay him. So it does kind of tie Montreal's hands, unlike Shea Weber, where you knew he wasn't coming back, but it was just good to move the contract, lower the cap hit regardless. But in the case of Price, he holds the key to so many pieces for Montreal to move forward. Not the least of which is, what has he got, if anything? We didn't really see much in those 5 games. Florida sent their C team in that last game of the regular season, which Montreal won 10-2. Which was nice to see Caulfield pad his numbers, but the rest of it, Carey got a win after losing the first 4. And really, the first 2 games he played were kind of non-starters, really. Like, there was really nothing really you could really evoke out of there. Like, you could really take as a measuring stick. Okay, how did he look? How did he move? The only thing I will say is he just, to me, he looked a little awkward in his side-to-side. Whether he's favored it or whatever, I don't know. So, first of all that said, dispose of it all. We're going to find out what's going on. Is he going to play this year or not? Are we going with some combination of, is it him and Allen to start, or is it Allen and Montabone and Primo or whatever? I will say this, that Laval going to the semifinals, Game 7 of the semis in the American Hockey League was fantastic. Fantastic for Caden Primo. I understand he played so well there. Just what he needed to reverse some of what he would have experienced in Montreal, playing behind not only a porous D, beat up or non-existent, not in the lineup, injuries, COVID, what have you, and a lineup of forwards in front of them that were equally just as porous or bad or non-existent. So they threw him to the wolves last year. And look, here's a guy who was drafted way late. Keith Primo's son, we all know, with so many expectations because of how he was developing after he was drafted, and came in with a lot of fanfare and promise. And I do believe he is going to be a regular NHL goaltender. I really do. Whether it's in Montreal or elsewhere, this guy's going to play in the show. I hope it's Montreal because I think they got a good one here. But Carey really holds the key here to a lot of what's going to happen in Montreal. That's long term. The situation is that as much as it would suck not to have some sort of finality in terms of can he come back, play regular being 50 games. He even said himself, he can't do 55 or more. Those days are done. So if you're not even looking at a 50-50 split, you're looking at only marginally more, and that would be if he's 100% healthy. And if he is, what can he actually play? Can he run? I always go by the numbers. Give me a 2.2 GAA and give me a 920 save percentage. Maybe that's a bit of a high save percentage. It's certainly higher than the average. But give me a 910 then. Give me a 910 save percentage. Give me a 220 goals against average. I need a starter to be able to give me those numbers. And I understand on a team that's going to finish bottom 5, that's probably unrealistic. So if it's Carey going in, even Carey going in at 2015 ability next season probably does not get this Montreal Canadian lineup in the playoffs. What do you mean? Take probably out of that. He doesn't. He simply doesn't. It's as simple as that. They just do not have the roster configuration for it right now. So that's a big one, though, to see how that plays out. And it will play out. What do I think will happen? I think he's going to play at some point this season. I think he's going to come in, and I feel in my heart, I may be pie in the sky here thinking, but I feel he's going to play well enough that Montreal, whether they have to eat some of this, are going to move him. He's going to waive his no move like he did when he went on waivers and potentially could have got claimed by Seattle, and he's going to get traded. And I think somehow they're going to make a deal with the Edmonton Oilers. And I predict that Carey Price, inside of 12 months, will be a member of the Edmonton Oilers. That's what I predict. So we'll see. And I predict the Montreal Canadiens to be bottom 5 next year. They'll be in the Connor Bedard sweepstakes, which is great. I love the Weber trade. They'll hang on to Josh Anderson unless he goes through this season and shows that he cannot get out of that inconsistent play. And then he becomes somebody that could be attractive at a trade deadline. Because what a pickup he would be going to a contender where he would be motivated to really bust his ass. And this is just part of it. It's the analogy I'm using. You take Josh Anderson and you parachute him back into the 50s and 60s, whether it be Art Ross or Toe Blake or Punch Imlach or Jack Adams, or go down the line. I mean, a lot of what these guys did, I was going to say reprehensible, but then you look at what Mike Babcock did and some of the coaches, you know, some of the coaches, some of the things that have gone on, Peters, whatnot, what have you, some of the things that have happened in the coaching ranks, in junior, in pro, in the NHL. My God, was what happened in the 50s any worse just because these guys, or 60s, were so super incredibly hard on their guys, to challenge them every single night to play to the best of their ability, especially playoff time? I don't know, it's hard to say. That's another discussion, probably over a couple of pints, to really get into that one. But Josh Anderson just needs to have a fire lit under his ass, and the guy just needs to, he doesn't need to become a point-a-game player. He doesn't need to fight 25 times a year. He doesn't, he just needs to elevate more consistently, and thereby giving Montreal more of an aid in terms of, if they do losing because the team you played had more talent. Not because you got ran out of the rink, not because you didn't back one of your smaller players who get smoked, which happens in Montreal all the time, not because you gave up and you don't care. And this is a guy that can make a difference game in and game out. Say, Josh, 0.4, you got to get to 0.75. You average 2 shots a game. Let's get to 3. Like let's look at some simple games here. You're in your prime, and I'm going to light a fire under you on some third periods coming up. This is what I would say if I was coaching him. And would say a couple times, look, if you're on the ice and someone's getting, and he's done it a couple of times, but it's got to happen all the time. Man, 28, holy lifting. Think about when you were 28 years old. I mean, we were bulletproof. At least I felt I was. What were you afraid of? Nothing. You'd fight anybody, you'd go anywhere, you'd do anything. This is 9,000 leagues below the NHL. This guy's in the NHL. Go after it, bud. He went toe-to-toe with Milan Lucic. Tara's gone. What do you got to worry about? Anyway, enough about that. Time to get out of here. And, finish on Dunrobin. It's a beauty. Colorado, Tampa. What a game this is going to be tonight. Whatever the Lightning have in the tank. Isn't it funny? Just a few short days ago, as they qualified for that third final in a row, which nobody has done since the Islanders. It's unfreaking believable. Now you're thinking, imagine the unthinkable at this point right now. Tampa coming back and winning 4 out of these remaining 5 to win this third cup in a row. The discussions that are going to come forth. I heard again, you read people say, hey, this is unbelievable in a cap era. Yeah, it is, except they're over the cap all the time. They were over by 15 or 16 million last year. In a 71-game regular season, all the games played with no fans in one location in Edmonton 2 years ago. Half the teams that give a crap didn't, like Pittsburgh, mailed it in against the Habs in that play-in series. And then last year, 56-game season, and give the Habs all the credit in the world, but they are Colorado, obviously, and they weren't even the Islanders who Tampa barely got by in that semifinal. I will maintain right now that Game 7, Tampa and New York Islanders last year in the semifinals was one of the better hockey games I've seen in the last 10 years. How the Islanders did not tie it up is absolutely beyond me. I don't know how many of you watched it. I don't know of those that did remember it. But I watched it, and I remember it, and it was absolutely amazing hockey, and they barely got by the Islanders, who got devastated this year with injuries and COVID, and Lou Lamoriello runs trots out of town. But what are you going to do? It's Lou. Look at his resume. Guy thinks he's the smartest guy in the room, and 90% of the time he's been right. So, it's not like he's won 10 cups, but he's certainly done pretty damn good. Anyway, Colorado, Tampa, it doesn't look like... Look, I call the Florida-Calgary final. So, hey, all my brackets busted. And taking a kicking in the pool because I went heavy on Florida Panthers. Who got swept by Tampa? I mean, you can imagine where you could have gone to Vegas and got the odds on that. Florida getting swept by... There's just no way. Okay, pick Tampa to win the series, but 4 straight? It's not a way, not an open hell. Anybody would have said that. Anyway, it was a tough week. I'm going to finish on this. And when I do, I'm going to try and pop another one of these out in a couple of days, get back to some history and some trivia and stuff. But what a tough week, man. I had memorial for my dear friend Paul Brophy and his brother Joe. They lost both their parents during COVID. Their amazing mother, Joan, and their incredible father, Patrick Brophy, who was an All-American out of Clarkson in 1963 on defense. You can look it up. And just everything he was as a hockey player, he was twice that as a man and 3 times that as a father. So we had a memorial in Brockville for Pat and Joan Brophy. Then Ian McCurdie, a longtime Manotick OPP officer, passed away, 81 years of age. Suddenly, he had a heart attack, fighting some health concerns, but still went quick, and that was a tough one. We had the wake and the funeral, and of course a great reception back at his son Glenn's and Glenn's wife Nancy's place. It was outstanding. reception, and then a memorial for Tony Princiotta, father to my dear friend Joe, who was gone 20 years on June 17th, and Joe had a memorial. We had a dinner at Orchard View, had all that in the span of 6 days. And I owe an apology to Barry Shelley, because I wanted to do a video for his Rink of Dreams, his weekend, and for the people. And this is a man who has good for the sport of hockey than anybody that's on social media right now. His heart and passion and compassion and his love for hockey and the men and the women who have supported it over all these years is second to none. And I'll go even further and say what he does to pump up and keep up memories of those that played in the minors in particular is second to none. And I did not get a chance to do a pre-video for Barry, simply because I was either doing videos for memorials, writing such, or attending. And man, I'll tell you, I've shown my age, I guess, a little bit. It took its toll on me. It really did. We're only a couple months removed from Guy and Bossy and Jean Potvin and Clark Gillies and all men who I knew personally. So it's been a rough couple of months, and you're trying to just live a normal life, and it's been tough. So for the guys who we memorialized last week, or lost last week, in the case of Ian McCurdie, Joan Brophy, Pat Brophy, Tony Princiotta, and of course Ian. And toast my dear friend Barry. So sorry, Barry, didn't get her done for you, but at least I'll got you out on this one, kid. And I know we'll talk soon. Everybody else, I don't know, man. I don't know how the Avs are losing tonight. We'll get into more Cale Makar next show as well. It is scary watching him right now. It is special. We'll talk about him more next show, guaranteed. Got any messages? Anything you want to know? Anything you want to ask? Fire me anytime, anything. I answer everybody. Stay well. Be safe. Appreciate the patience. Went a little long today. We'll catch you next time.